Good morning, everybody. So great to be together today. So we're continuing our journey through the book of Exodus. We're getting close to the end. We're all the way up to the story of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Last time, 3 weeks ago now, we were looking at 1 man, 4 women, and 12 sons. So which of Jacob's, or Israel's, sons can you name? Benjamin, who's the youngest.
Joseph, Reuben.
Yep. Gad is one of them. Yep. Asher. Levi. Simeon. Yep. Issachar. You're remembering a lot of them. There you go. But who's probably the most famous? Joseph. Yep. So Joseph got himself in trouble early on with his brothers. You know, he had 11 brothers, so it was easy. You kind of expect there to be some competition and that sort of. And he was the second to the youngest, and yet he was the one who was kind of uppity, kind of thing. Yeah.
Was it? Did they have 12 sons and no girls?
They had one daughter.
One daughter.
Dinah. Yeah. Yep. 12 boys.
Wow.
4 women.
Yeah.
There were 4 women that these kids came from, but just one daughter. All the rest of them were boys. So yeah, you can just imagine the testosterone in that family. And Joseph was the second to the youngest, and he got himself in trouble all the time, mostly from kind of putting himself up a little bit, sharing all these dreams that he had that made it sound like he was going to be the best of all of them. So do you have a memorable story of someone who kind of like tattled on you? What sort of drama did you have in your family growing up? Older cousins. Well, for my family, we just had 2 of us, just me and my brother. And, he was my little brother, and so he was constantly tagging along everywhere I went, and I was, get kind of sick of him sometimes, and sometimes I wasn't very nice. But then I came home one summer from college, and he had gone right by. He's 6'8" now. I said, hello. Yeah. Guess he knows how I feel. Right. I said, I guess I'm not going to be picking on you anymore.
I had a younger brother too, but he never tattled on me.
No.
She did on me.
Hey, if you don't have any,
So good thing there's 2 people between.
If I got trouble in school,
You
it wasn't
never
just,
did.
yeah, but if we did, my dad heard about it at home.
Yep.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
So, why do you think that Joseph behaved the way that he did with his brothers?
His father.
His father? Why?
The coat of many colors. Father, as far as I'm concerned, he planted the seeds for these headaches and watered it and tended it generously.
Yep.
Favorite.
He was his favorite. Yep. Favorites always cause problems. And we'd seen that in the generations beforehand. Jacob was the favorite of his mom. His brother Esau was the favorite of his dad. And there was all this conniving that had gone on. And so, yeah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? So Joseph had these dreams that God gave to him. Do you remember what the dreams were? So if you don't remember, grab a Bible. We're going to be looking at, this is chapters 37 to 41. Some of you may remember these already. He was
Genesis?
Genesis 37. What's that? No, that came later. This was.
This was when he was in his
Oh no, yeah, no,
childhood?
you're right. The sheaves of wheat. Yeah. So he's 17 years old at this point. The youngest, the second to the youngest, 12, and he's out. He's pasturing the flocks, and he's been given this coat of many colors, or it can also be translated a coat with long sleeves. To kind of make him look special. That Jacob gave to him because he loved him more than all his other brothers. And because of that, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. And he had this dream. Behold, and then he immediately told his brothers about this. Hear this dream that I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. How do you think his brothers took that? What? Are you
Hated
indeed
him all the more so.
Are you indeed to reign over us or rule over us? And so they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. They already didn't like him. Now they've got double reason.
Going well in the fire, huh?
Mm-hmm. And then he had another dream. He told it to his brothers and said, behold, I've dreamed another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Well, who's that supposed to represent? The whole family bowing down to me. What is, even his father said, what is this dream you've dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers come and bow ourselves to the ground before you? So his brothers were jealous. Yeah. Was he born at this time? That's a good question. It may be a little bit later. He was already born? Okay. That's right. Yep. Yeah. That happened in the chapter before this, in chapter 35. Yeah. She actually wanted to name Benjamin Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow. But instead, his dad named him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So, what kind of fallout did this start to have in their family? I mean, it's one thing to have a dream. It's another thing to, let me tell you all about this.
You kind of raved about it.
Yeah. Because how did his brothers respond?
They started to plot.
Envy, jealousy, hatred. Let's find a way to get rid of this dreamer. And so they had gone out, to pasture their father's flock a ways away, and Jacob said, "Oh, go, check on your brothers," and verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Yeah, they wanted to get rid of him. And then, let's kill him and throw him into a pit and say that a fierce animal's devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But one of them, Reuben, said, no, let's not kill him. Let's figure something else out. And so they captured him. They stripped the robe off him, threw him down into the pit. And then what did they end up doing? Yeah, there was this caravan going by on its way down to where? Down to Egypt, where Abraham had gone before, when there was a famine. So they thought, we'll get rid of him. We'll never hear from him again. And all of this is coming from envy, from jealousy. How has jealousy or envy affected your family or someone close to you?
poison your thinking.
Yeah, it kind of poisons you, turns you sour, makes you resentful of the other person.
And then things can turn around and change it, and you're no longer resentful.
Mm-hmm. What does envy kind of do inside a family or inside a friendship? Yeah, it can easily ruin a friendship, split a family. You end up with two camps. Yep. So, what happens after this? Joseph's story.
You take his coat or something and wild animals or something.
Yeah. Right. They took one of their goats that they were pasturing, and they killed it, and they dipped the robe in it, and took it back and said, "Look what we found." And what did Jacob think? Yeah, that he'd been killed by a wild animal. But he's gone, I'll never see him again. And so, where does Joseph end up? All the way down in Egypt. Sold into slavery by his own brothers. They gave him 20 shekels of silver. What does that sound like? Yeah. Jesus was sold by one of his own disciples. I don't know if it was 20 or 30 shekels. Yeah. Same kind of thing. So, yep. Yeah, have you or someone you know been betrayed by somebody close to you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did it feel?
You probably feel hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And you could feel stupid or sort of saying something and you trust it, but you didn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you imagine what might have been going through Joseph's head on that caravan trip all the way down to Egypt?
You would think that it would be eating a brother's conscience too.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if Joseph, like, maybe I shouldn't have done this to you.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I shouldn't.
Right?
And so,
Mm-hmm.
You never really see it.
Right. Yeah. Just despair of being taken away far from anywhere that I've ever been, and going from being the favorite son, to the one who had everything, to having nothing, being a slave, far from my family. I've never seen them again. So it says that at the end of 37, chapter 37, that the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. And then there's kind of a pause in the story. We don't hear more about Joseph until chapter 39. 38 is about the story of Judah and Tamar. So Judah was one of the brothers. He was the one that the whole tribe of Judah, which is it was the largest tribe, where they later were established where Jerusalem is. And Judah, got married, had 2 sons, one named and one named Onan, and a third one, Sheila. Strange. Yeah, Shelah, Shelah. And so he found a wife for his firstborn for but it said that was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. He died. So what was supposed to happen with the widow of a man who died in those days?
So you go to your brother's wife and marry her.
Right. Yep.
And raise up an heir to
right.
your brother.
Yep. So the practice was that the next brother in line should marry her, even if he was already married, so that and have a child with her, so that her, the first brother's line could be continued. It was a way of taking care of the widow, but also continuing the line of the family. And so, Judah said, "Go and, Onan, go marry her." And so he did, but he didn't want to give her a child, and so he didn't give her a child. Yep. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and so God put him to death too. And so. So now Judah's like, "Oh man, 2 of my sons are dead. I'm not going to give my third one to her because he might get put to death too." And so here she is, no child, and no way to support herself, really. So she takes matters into her own hands. She was essentially having to be a widow, and so back in her own father's house, and so the shame and the having to be back under her with her father rather than having a family of her own. And so she decides to take matters into her own hands. And she found out, Judah is going to a particular town to check on to shear his sheep over there. So she took off all of her widow's clothing and dressed herself up and put on a veil and went in, sat down on this road that he was going to be going by, making herself look like a shrine prostitute. And Judah came up and propositioned her. She said, "Well, what will you give me?" He said, "Well, I'm going to give you a young goat from the flock." Well, then give me. You don't have your flocks right here. Give me something, like a pledge, so I know that you'll, actually bring me what you told me. What do you want? Well, how about your signet ring and your staff that you got in your hand? And so he gave those to her and had his way with her, and then went on. But then she disappeared, went back to her father's house, and was like, "Hey, I came back with the goat. Where's the girl?" We don't have a prostitute around here. And somebody else told him. And then later on, it turned out she was pregnant. And if you were pregnant and not married, that was a crime punishable by death in those days. And they were going to put her to death. But she said, "Well, tell you what, here's the ring and the staff from the guy who did this. And then Judah was like, oh.
Yeah.
You were in the right. He said, she is more righteous than I, because I didn't give her my third son. It turns out she had twins. And so there's a whole nother story about them.
Wait, was it girl, boy, or boy, boy?
This was boy.
Okay.
Yep. So she was in labor. One put out a hand. The midwife, tied a scarlet thread around his hand and said this one came out first. But then he drew it back in, and the other one came out first.
Only in the Bible.
And so she named the one who came out first Perez, which means a breach. She said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." And the other one with the scarlet thread around his hand was called Zerah. So, yeah, all these,
Wow.
crazy. So often it's like God chooses the second rather than the first. He chooses a later one, like Joseph. This second to the last ends up becoming greater than all the others. So, how did God turn things around for Joseph in Egypt? What do you remember happened next? He was,
It's a famine.
yeah, well, but even before that,
Started having more dreams.
Prophecy.
right. So, yes, what were you going to
So
say?
you had the cupbearer or
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. That's in chapter 40. Right, that's right. So, but how did he get it? How did he end up in prison? So he gets put in the, as a servant of this commander of the guard, a pretty prosperous guy, and he notices that everything that Joseph did went well, and so he promotes him. He makes him second in command of everything, puts him in charge of his whole household. Like, wow, this guy is doing well in slavery. But then what happened? Potiphar's wife got interested in Joseph. He's handsome. And so she was trying to force herself on him. And he ran away, and she actually grabbed onto his cloak and, so he left it behind. And then she, said to her husband, "Look, your servant was trying to, molest me." And so he had him thrown in prison.
She's just dying.
The Bible is just,
We might need a rating on
this,
explicit
this
material.
is PG-13 or more.
Parental guidance strongly.
So he's in prison now. But what happens?
When we were in Christian day school, they skipped a bunch of these stories too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But what happens with these? While Joseph's in prison? Right. So, yeah, and not only that, but even before that, at the end of chapter 38, the Lord was with Joseph, showed him steadfast love, gave him favor in the sight of the prison warden, and he put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners in the prison. So again, everything that Joseph is doing, God is blessing. But then there's these two guys that come into the prison, and both of them worked for Pharaoh. What were the two guys? What were their roles?
Baker? Is there a baker?
Right. So one's the cupbearer, the one who is probably like the poison tester,
Like a burnt the bread, huh?
Yeah, and then the baker,
Throw him in prison.
both of them, Pharaoh was angry with them and had them thrown in prison. And one night, each of them had a dream. And what dreams did they have? This is chapter 4. No, that's coming. That comes later. Yep.
The baker has trays on his head and the birds eat the contents off.
Right. So yeah, the cupbearer had this dream. So this is verse 10, and I said, I saw this vine, and there was on the vine there were 3 branches, and suddenly it budded, and blossoms came out, and the clusters ripened into grapes, and Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup in Pharaoh's hand. What does this mean? And Joseph said, here's your interpretation. And it's not mine. This comes from God. I don't have the power to interpret dreams, but God does. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head. He's going to restore you to your office. You're going to place Pharaoh's cup in his hand again. Now, when that happens, please be kind and tell him about me. Because I've been taken out of the land of the Hebrews, and I have done nothing that they should put me here in this prison. Then the baker comes to him, thinking, the other guy got a really good dream, a really good interpretation. I'd like that too. And he said, I had a dream too. There were these 3 cake baskets on my head. And the top one, there's all kinds of baked food for Pharaoh. But there were these birds that were eating out of it. What does it mean? What did it mean?
Terrible.
It was not good. He said, here's the interpretation. 3 baskets for 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh. And that all came to pass. On the 3rd day, it was Pharaoh's birthday. He made a feast for all of his servants. He lifted up the head of his chief cupbearer and brought him back to his position. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted. No idea. But God saw it coming. Told Pharaoh, or told Joseph. But the chief cupbearer forgot about Joseph. He was so excited to be back, he completely forgot about Joseph. 2 whole years went by. And then Pharaoh had a dream. Actually, had 2 dreams. What were they? So this is chapter 41. Yeah, cows. So there were 7 cows came up out of the Nile, and they were attractive, plump cows. They were feeding on the reed grass. And then there were 7 ugly cows, gaunt, and what did the ugly cows do? They ate up the big cows. Pharaoh's like, what on earth is this dream? And then he has another dream. What's that one about? Grain. 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And after them came 7 more ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And they swallowed up the 7 plump ears. And Pharaoh called in all of his magicians and all of his wise men. And what did they have to say to him? We have no idea. What weird dreams. But who suddenly remembered cupbearer said, I know someone who could interpret your dreams. Tells him about Pharaoh, or tells him about Joseph and what had happened to him and how he was restored to his position. And so Pharaoh calls in Joseph. And what does, and he says, I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph said, well, it's not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So Pharaoh tells him these dreams. And what does God tell Joseph to tell him? Yeah.
Each year of grain represents a year.
Right.
7 good years.
Mm-hmm.
Great harvest followed by 7 years of
Yep. He said those 2 dreams, same dream, same thing. 7 years of plenty, huge crops, bumper crops, and then 7 years of the most horrible famine ever. And
Plenty will be forgotten.
yeah, so much that you won't even remember those bumper crops. And so therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Appoint overseers, take 1/5 of the produce of the land during those 7 plentiful years. Gather it up, store it, so that, as a reserve for the land against those 7 years of famine that are coming, so that everyone won't die because of the famine. And so Pharaoh said, sounds good. You're the man. You do it. So here he goes from being taken from his home, sold into slavery, sent to Egypt, unjustly accused, put in prison, and suddenly he's second in command of the whole country of Egypt. Have you ever experienced God using your dreams? You ever had a really significant dream? Maybe not of put in charge of your family or something like that, but has there ever been a really significant or unusual dream that later you've seen, oh, that's where this came from, or what it was pointing toward? A lot of times my dreams are kind of just stuff I've been thinking about and seeing or whatever that kind of get all stuff from the past. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I had for supper, I don't know.
Well, before my casting of Into the Woods, so I would always imagine myself getting like Cinderella or the Baker's Wife. And I never imagined I would get the Witch, which is the role that I got.
Uh-huh.
But a couple weeks beforehand, I had a dream where a castle came out and I was casted as the Witch, and I was like, I never thought about that, and it was like,
It
huh.
came true.
And then it came true. So,
Uh-huh. Or do you know of somebody else who's had a really significant dream that kind of had an effect on them somehow?
I've had some really powerful dreams about my mom. Today is the day that she died 26 years ago. But I've had some dreams about her over the years that felt so real, and when I woke up, I felt like I had actually touched her face or heard her voice or really been with her. And I think that God has used those dreams to remind me that she still loves me so much, because when you lose someone, you miss their love so much, and for many years I felt so lost without her, and then I realized that she still loves me, and she's still, I don't know what she can see of my life, but I know that she loves me, and so I can still feel that love from her once I realize that she still loves me. You know? So those dreams remind me of
She's
that,
still looking
her
over
presence.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
My grandma, whose name was Martha, so my dad's mom, her husband was quite a bit older than her, and he died first, and she was just lost without him. They'd been together so long, and months later, she'd sold her house and moved into an apartment, and just was just feeling so lonely. And she had a dream one night, or to her it felt like more than a dream. Like she was lying there, and suddenly felt him next to her. No words, just felt him there. And that afterwards just gave her this relief of he still loves me. He's still here. If you could have a glimpse of the future or a journey into the past, which would you choose?
Like,
Which would you
what do you
like?
mean the past? Like the past of your life, or the past of just like any?
Any.
Any? I want to know the Victorian era.
Okay. You want to see what it was like in Victorian?
My favorite. I wouldn't choose, of course, nowadays to go to one of those boarding schools that the girls went to where they were taught manners. But I don't know. It's just kind of like ew manners. But still, I felt like I would still kind of like enjoy like a day like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to my friend yesterday about this actually, because like I just love how like grand that era was, and like all the dresses and just how like the architecture. Oh, that's true. Yeah, but still, just very grand and beautiful.
For the 1.1% of the upper crust.
Well, yeah, but still.
Yeah. How about the rest of you? Right? Is there a what would if you could be given a glimpse of the future or a glimpse of the past, what would you choose?
Can you make different decisions if you go back?
Yeah. What if you could go back and change something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Glimpse of the future doesn't seem too think about what's going to happen in my grandkids in the future.
I was just going to say,
You don't want to spoil it for you.
Well, I know I wouldn't say one at all.
Well, you might not like what the future had in some ways, but if you could choose particular days in your past, like I'd love to go back and pick up these guys when they were, 2 years old in their onesies, jammies, like that. If you could choose, but we don't know. Yeah.
But I agree with it.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you couldn't choose, because there's days in my past that I wouldn't want to go through again.
That happened to me. I was
Yes.
that.
I wouldn't dare say differently.
Your favorite song, right?
Yes.
If you could choose, there are like there that I'm experiencing again because it was just so much fun. I think.
So, what do you see as God's role in Joseph's story? He went through so much.
Just like life is ups and downs,
Right?
God, God's in control. And why it all happened. It's in God's hands.
Don't despair. Trust in God that it'll work out for the best.
Yeah. How do we see God working through?
The 17-year-old Joseph would never have had the wisdom to make the plans that he did when he became Pharaoh's second in command.
Yeah, absolutely. If he had just been plucked up and dropped into Pharaoh's house, he wouldn't have that wisdom.
Well, it seems he works through all our foibles too, all our
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yep. Even though,
he brings good out of it.
So he'd given Joseph these dreams of hope about his future, but even though Joseph messed up by bragging about it to his brothers and his family, God still worked through all of it. And what were some ways that you can see that God was at work in Joseph's life? Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything that he did, he prospered.
You know, as smart aleck as he tended to be, he does say to Pharaoh, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he deserves. So he had a humility there. And
yes. So getting sold into slavery, getting shipped off to Egypt, being a slave, and then seeing things go better unexpectedly, he gained some humility there, where he realized this isn't my doing. I don't have the ability to tell people what those dreams mean. I haven't seen my dreams come true, but he pointed people in the right, pointed them in the right direction. He said, God can tell you what this means.
I'd love to know what happened when he became second in command, if he ever ran into Potiphar.
Well, later on, yeah, it really doesn't say, I don't think.
Well, he wouldn't include anything
All right. Potiphar was like,
only if his wife pulls off the same thing when they're loving.
yeah, we don't hear the rest of Potiphar's story.
Okay.
Yep. We don't know, do we? Have you ever suffered through things that weren't your fault? Yeah. What happened?
You can forgive. It's hard to forget.
Mm-hmm. When someone else has done something against you. Yeah. So, Pharaoh, Joseph had given the interpretation to Pharaoh. Here's what this means. Your two dreams are just one. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. You need somebody that's going to be able to put everything away that you need so that you don't lose the whole land. And so Pharaoh said, since God's shown you all this, there's none so discerning and wise as you. So you shall be over my house. All my people shall order themselves as you command. Only regards the throne will I be greater than you. And so he puts him over all of Egypt. He takes his signet ring and puts it on Joseph's hand. Puts garments of fine linen, a gold chain around his neck. What echoes do you hear there?
There were a bunch of bureaucrats who weren't happy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All these other guys wise men,
He's a
magicians,
Hebrew slave. How did he get this job?
right?
It reminds you of the prodigal son.
Yeah, how so?
Well, when he came home, his father didn't know about him.
Yes.
He didn't know him,
Mhm.
and he made a priest.
Yeah. Said you are, because the son had squandered his inheritance. He had essentially said to his dad, "I wish you were dead. Give me my money." And his dad did, and he went away and wasted it all. And then there was a famine in the land, and he's reduced to feeding pigs. How well would that have gone over for a Jewish person, a Jewish guy? Taking care of the unclean animals.
Not only that, he tried to eat some of those cobs.
He's like, oh,
Yeah.
What am I doing? Eating, covered in pig stink, and I'm trying to eat pig food? Even my father's servants are better off than I am. I should go home. And what kind of speech did he, plan to tell his father?
Sin against him.
Yeah, I did a terrible thing. Sinned against you, sinned against God. I'm not worthy to be called your son. So please treat me like one of your servants. Let me just work for you. I'm desperate. But he gets home, and what happens even before he got home? Yeah. He saw him from a long ways off. And why would he run?
He wanted to make sure that he got to him before the other villagers did.
Why?
Because he had shamed the entire village
Mhm.
because he ran over and stole all his father's money.
Right. I mean, what that son had done, essentially saying, "I wish you were dead, Dad."
Word got around.
Yeah. And they had to sell stuff because they're, just like a lot of farmers around here, their wealth is in their land and their equipment and their assets. That they don't have lots of money just lying around and say, "Okay, here you go. A third of what I own is now yours." I can't just hand it to you in cash. They had to sell it quick at a loss, most likely. And so it impoverished his family and affected the whole community. And so all the other villagers, they'd seen him first, they probably would have run him out of town on a rail. Tar and feathers or worse.
Or if his brother would have seen him.
Yeah. And so he ran to him, which was crazy. Old men. Especially in those days, they would walk. Old. Here he, and to run, they weren't wearing jeans, long robes. He had to hike up his arm so he could run. Everybody behind him got a view.
I don't think he had sneakers on either.
Sandals.
He was willing to put himself to shame to get to his son before anybody else could. That's how much he loved him. And he'd see him a long ways off because he was constantly looking. It's my son coming back.
I bet you God put that in the father's mind that he's coming back.
So this was Jesus' story, his parable.
Why would
To
he
show
be
us.
looking all the time
Yeah,
down the road? He's coming.
right. Because he loved him so much. He wanted him to come. He was waiting. Even years later. And so
With his prayer, he loved him.
And And so the whole point of that parable is that's how much God loves us. That's how much God loves us. But what's the rest of the story? Right? So Dad throws a party. Kills the fatted calf. All these people come. Huge party. Brother comes in from the field. What's going on? Your brother's back. We're having a party. What does the older brother think?
Well, I think the brother was also human, though. I mean, we would act probably the same way. We would act the same way.
So what was what should have been the older brother's role in that party?
The leader,
He should have been the maitre d'. He should have been the one welcoming everybody, making sure they had what they need,
yeah, but he was
making sure stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead, he's been carrying this chip on his shoulder this whole time, and so when Dad actually hears about the son, won't come in, being just as obstinate and resentful. Actually leaves the party, goes out to talk to him. Says, please come in. Now you, this son of yours has wasted your money. Now you welcome him back with open arms. You even killed the fatted calf for him. You never even gave me a goat to have a party with my friends. Apparently, you got a goat. That's a party. And the dad says, son, you've always been with me. Everything that I have belongs to you. But we had to throw a party because your brother
was lost,
but found he was dead and it's alive. So of course we had to throw a party.
They had a lot of parties in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, they had for days and sometimes weeks.
Right? Yeah. A wedding was always a week long. That's a really interesting point to that story. That's where the parable ends. Jesus ended the parable right there. We had to celebrate because your brother has come home.
Fell into space.
Yes.
What do you think?
What happened?
What do you think?
Because how could that have gone? How could that have gone? What's like the two different ways that story could have ended? Okay, Dad.
Or else, sorry.
Yeah. Otherwise, he could have stayed obstinate. He could have gotten so angry at his father that he maybe beat his father or killed his father.
Maybe did the same thing.
Maybe he ran off.
Oh.
But it was a parable anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. So
You were lost.
I think he left it open-ended like that to make us think about ourselves. To make us see ourselves in that older brother. Have you ever had somebody, whether it's a sibling or someone else in your class or whatever, who did better than you and you were jealous and angry and bitter? I've been there. It's so easy to go down that path of bitterness and anger and rage. But look where it leads. That's where Joseph went because of his brother's anger, jealousy. And all started because of favoritism. I think. So that's our story next week. Next week, everything turns around. Yep. So next week we're going to look at the rest of the story, chapters 42 to 50. No, you know
And
the
not
rest
the
of
rest
the
of the
story. Well, let's close in prayer. Lord, thank you for the story of Joseph and his family. Thank you for the story of the prodigal son, or the two lost sons, or the prodigal father. Thank you that you are such a loving and good father who knows what's best for us, and chases after us and watches for us to come back. Thank you for the way that you restored Joseph and the way that you restore us. Help us to treat one another with the same kind of grace and love that you have shown to us in Jesus. Everybody say, have a good week, everybody.